Number 1. Stupendemys Geographicus, the giant turtle with predation scars. 10 million years ago, the western Amazon was not a river system. It was a network of shallow lakes and swamps stretching over 1 million square kilometers, a mega wetland called the Pebas system. And in that water, something moved that does not belong in any modern frame of reference: a turtle the size of a small car. Stupendemys Geographicus was first described by the paleontologist Roger Wood in 1976 from fossils pulled out of the Urubamba Formation in northern Venezuela, but it took until 2020 for the full picture to emerge. That year, Edwin Cadena and his team published new specimens in Science Advances, collected from both Venezuela and Colombia. The carapace, the upper shell, measured up to 2.4 meters long. The estimated body mass exceeded 1,100 kilograms. To put that in perspective, the largest freshwater turtle alive today, the Asian softshell Pelocheles cantori, tops out at about a meter. Stupendemys was more than twice its length and many times its weight, but the size was not the strangest thing about it. Male specimens had large forward-facing horns projecting from the front of the shell. No other turtle, living or extinct, has ever been found with horns on its carapace. Cadena's team CT scanned the horn structures and found dense, solid bone, the kind of internal architecture you see in animals that use their horns for physical combat, not display. Females had no horns at all. This was a species with intense male-on-male competition, fighting over mates in a Miocene swamp. And then there were the scars. Multiple Stupendemys shells bear deep puncture marks along their margins. The spacing, depth, and morphology of those marks match the dentition of one animal, Purussaurus Brasiliensis, the largest caiman ever to have lived. Some of those bite marks show signs of healing. Bone had regrown around the wound, which means the turtle survived the attack. It carried the evidence of a fight between two animals that, by any modern standard, should not exist, and it lived to swim another day. The closest living relatives of Stupendemys are the Podocnемys river turtles still found in the Amazon today. Small, quiet, unremarkable. The lineage survived. The scale did not. Number 2. Megapiranha Paranensis. Before we get to the caiman that left those bite marks, there's another predator worth meeting, one that reframes everything you think you know about piranhas. Megapiranha Paranensis was described by the Argentine paleontologist Alberto Cione and colleagues in 2009 based on fossils from the Paraná Formation in Argentina. It lived during the late Miocene, roughly 8 to 10 million years ago. Its estimated body length was about 71 centimeters, roughly 4 times the length of a modern piranha, with a body mass approaching 10 kilograms compared to the 1 to 2 kilograms of its living descendants. The teeth are what matter most. Modern piranhas have a single row of triangular, interlocking teeth. Their close relatives, the pacus, herbivorous fish that crush seeds and nuts, have a double row. Megapiranha had something in between, a zigzag arrangement with teeth offset in a transitional pattern that sits precisely at the evolutionary fork between carnivore and herbivore. This single jaw fragment is one of the most important pieces of evidence for how piranhas and pacus diverged from a common ancestor. But the jaw did more than tell an evolutionary story. In 2012, a team led by Justin Grubich published a study in Scientific Reports that measured the bite force of living black piranhas and then used biomechanical scaling to estimate what Megapiranha could generate. The numbers were extraordinary. A modern black piranha, Cerassalmus rhombeus, produces about 320 newtons of bite force, already remarkable for a fish that size. Megapiranha's estimated range was 1,240 to 4,749 newtons. Pound for pound, that is the strongest bite force of any bony fish ever measured. It exceeds the bite force to body weight ratio of Tyrannosaurus rex. It exceeds the great white shark. The zigzag teeth would have created a serrated cutting surface, capable of shearing through flesh and possibly crushing bone. The jaw mechanics relied on a uniquely reinforced mandibular symphysis and an arrangement of adductor muscles that has no modern equivalent. Only the premaxillary teeth survive in the type specimen. Much of the skull is inferred from phylogenetic bracketing. But the inference is solid. Related fossil piranha species have been found in Colombia and Venezuela, confirming a pan-Amazonian distribution. Modern piranhas, for all their reputation, are primarily scavengers and opportunistic feeders. The feeding frenzy image is largely a myth. The real monster was their ancestor, and it swam the same waters as something far worse. Number 3, the Lidar city networks. The Amazon is not a wilderness. That statement would have been controversial 20 years ago. It is now an archaeological fact. Lidar, light detection and ranging, works by firing millions of laser pulses from an aircraft toward the ground. Most of the pulses hit the canopy and bounce back, but some slip through gaps in the leaves and reach the forest floor. When you filter out the canopy returns and keep only the ground level data, you get a topographic map of extraordinary precision. And what that map shows across thousands of square kilometers of Amazon basin are cities. In 2022, Heiko Prumers and his team published results in Nature from Lidar surveys of the Llanos de Mojos region in the Bolivian Amazon. They found the remains of the Casarabe culture dating from roughly 500 to 1400 CE. The sites were not villages. They were urban centers with stepped platforms rising up to 22 meters, U-shaped ceremonial architecture, and raised causeways extending kilometers between settlements. The settlement pattern was hierarchical, primary centers connected to secondary centers connected to satellite sites, all linked by roads and canals engineered above flood level to allow year-round travel through seasonally inundated landscape. 2 years later, in 2024, Stephen Rostaine and colleagues published in Science the results of a Lidar survey in the Upano Valley of eastern Ecuador. They found over 6,000 earthen platforms connected by a network of wide, straight roads, some up to 10 meters across, stretching dozens of kilometers. The complex dates to approximately 500 BCE to 600 CE, making it one of the oldest known urban systems anywhere in the Amazon. The roads were not footpaths. They were planned infrastructure implying centralized authority. Population estimates for the pre-contact Amazon have been revised dramatically. Early models assumed 1 to 2 million people across the entire basin. Current estimates, informed by Lidar, Terra Preta, distribution, and settlement density analysis, range from 8 to 20 million. The raised agricultural fields, cameloons, that accompanied these urban systems could produce enough surplus food to support dense non-agricultural populations. The water management infrastructure, canals, reservoirs, causeways, rivaled anything in contemporary Mesoamerica. Earlier ground-based work by archaeologists like Clark Erickson and Michael Heckenberger had already suggested large-scale habitation. Lidar confirmed that what they found on the ground was a fragment. The full scale was beyond what anyone had imagined, and the cities were empty before Europeans ever reached most of them. The question is what happened between the Lidar cities and the sparse populations that European explorers eventually encountered. The answer begins with bones that are far older than any city. Number 4. Giant ground sloth butchery sites. Megapiranha americanum stood up to 6 meters tall when it reared on its hind legs. It weighed approximately 4 tons. Its claws were up to 30 centimeters long. In the Amazon basin specifically, the dominant species was Erematherium laurelardi, a closely related giant that ranged across Brazil, Venezuela, and Colombia throughout the Pleistocene. These animals are gone. And the evidence for why they disappeared leads directly to humans. At the Santa Helena rock shelter in Mato Grosso, Brazil, archaeologists found ground sloth osteoderms, the bony plates embedded in the animal's skin, in direct association with stone tools and human occupation layers. The radiocarbon dates point to approximately 27,000 years ago. If those dates hold under continued scrutiny, Santa Helena represents some of the earliest evidence of human presence anywhere in South America. And those humans were not simply coexisting with giant sloths. They were processing them. Cut marks on ground sloth bones have been identified at multiple sites across South America using scanning electron microscopy. The technique distinguishes human tool marks from carnivore tooth marks and from geological damage with high reliability. The patterns are consistent, parallel striations at angles indicating defleshing and disarticulation. This was not scavenging. It was systematic butchery. At the Arroyo del Vizcaíno site in Uruguay, Richard Farinha and colleagues documented over 1,000 ground sloth bones bearing tool marks. The concentration suggests a mass kill or processing site, a place where early humans returned repeatedly to exploit the carcasses of the largest animals on the continent. The timing of ground sloth extinction roughly 10 to 12,000 years ago, coincides with both human expansion across the Americas and the end Pleistocene climate shifts. The overkill hypothesis, first formalized by Paul Martin in 1967, argues that human hunters drove megafauna to extinction within a few thousand years of arrival. The climate hypothesis argues that warming, forest expansion, and the loss of open grassland destroyed the habitats these animals depended on. Most researchers today favor a synergy model. Human predation delivered the final blow to populations already stressed by environmental change. Biomechanical analysis suggests giant ground sloths were slow-moving. Their massive claws were built for digging and pulling branches, not for combat. They would have been vulnerable to coordinated group hunting. Some species dug enormous burrow systems, Paleoticas, found across southern Brazil, tunnels large enough for a human to walk through upright. The burrows outlasted the animals by millennia. When the ground sloths disappeared, the ecological consequences were profound. Giant herbivores are major seed dispersers. Daniel Jansen and Paul Martin proposed in 1982 that many large fruited tropical trees, including the avocado and the papaya, evolved to have their seeds dispersed by megafauna. Those fruits are now anachronistic, designed for a consumer that no longer exists. Every avocado is an evolutionary orphan. Over 50 genera of megafauna went extinct in South America at the end of the Pleistocene. It was the most devastating extinction event on any continent, and the Amazon basin was at the center of it. Number 5, the Miocene Amazon Inland Sea. The Amazon River, the one you picture, the largest river on Earth draining east into the Atlantic, is geologically young. For most of the Miocene epoch, from roughly 23 to 10 million years ago, it did not exist. In its place was something far stranger. The Pibas mega-wetland system covered over 1 million square kilometers of what is now western Brazil, eastern Peru, Colombia, Ecuador, and Bolivia. It was fed by rivers draining from the rising Andes to the west. To the east, a geological barrier called the Purus Arch blocked the water from flowing toward the Atlantic. The result was a vast, shallow, semi-permanent body of water, part lake, part swamp, part sea. And it was periodically connected to the Caribbean. Marine incursions flooded the system with salt water, carrying ocean species deep into the continental interior. The evidence is unambiguous. Fossils of bull sharks, the Carcharhinus lineage, have been recovered from Miocene sediments in Peru, more than 1,000 kilometers from the modern coastline. Giant sawfish up to 6 meters long left their distinctive rostral teeth in the Pebas deposits. Marine mammals, dugongs, and early seal relatives have been identified in the same formations. A 2017 study led by Karina Horn confirmed marine influence deposits across vast areas of the western Amazon. The Pebas system was not just home to marine strays. It hosted one of the most extraordinary radiations of freshwater and brackish water life in Earth's history. Hundreds of endemic mollusk species evolved in its waters, an explosion of biodiversity that rivals modern coral reefs in some taxonomic groups. At least 7 species of crocodilians coexisted, including Purussaurus, the bizarre flat-headed filter feeder Murasuchus, and the gharial-like fish specialist Posuchus. The productivity of the system must have been staggering to support that many apex predators simultaneously. The transition began roughly 10 million years ago. As the Andes rose higher, sediment loads increased. The porous arch was eventually breached. Water that had pooled in the west began to drain eastward. By approximately 9 to 7 million years ago, the modern Amazon River's course to the Atlantic was established. Before that, much of the drainage had flowed north into the Caribbean. The ecological consequences of the transition were catastrophic. Most Pebas megafauna lineages went extinct as their shallow water habitat disappeared. The giant turtles, the megacaimanins, the brackish water specialists, all gone. But one lineage survived in a form you can still see today. The Amazon pink river dolphin, Inia geoffrensis, is not descended from other freshwater dolphins. Its closest relatives are oceanic dolphins. It is a marine animal that became trapped in freshwater as the Pebas system drained and the Amazon River formed. Every time one surfaces in a brown Amazonian tributary, it is a living biological echo of an inland sea that vanished 10 million years ago. Number 6. Purussaurus Brasiliensis, the 40-foot caiman that ruled the Miocene Amazon. Now the predator that left those bite marks on Stupendemys. Purussaurus Brasiliensis was first described by the Brazilian naturalist João Barbosa Rodrigues in 1892 based on a fragmentary skull found along the Purus River in the Amazonian interior. It took over a century of additional fossil discoveries to understand what Rodrigues had found. The estimated total body length is 10 to 12.5 meters, 33 to 41 feet. The body mass ranges from 5,000 to 8,400 kilograms, roughly comparable to a large African elephant. In 2015, Tito Aureliano and colleagues published a biomechanical study in PLOS One that modeled the bite force of Purussaurus. The number was 69,000 newtons. The modern saltwater crocodile, the largest living reptile, generates approximately 16,000 newtons. Purussaurus was more than 4 times stronger. The skull alone measured roughly 1.4 meters in length, armed with massive conical teeth designed for crushing rather than slicing. CT scanning of cranial material revealed internal architecture specifically adapted for absorbing the extreme mechanical stress of that bite. Purussaurus lived in the Pibas megawetland during the late Miocene, roughly 8 to 11 million years ago. Its diet, inferred from fossilized stomach contents and associated remains, included giant turtles, large rodents, and fish. Aureliano's team estimated a daily food requirement of approximately 40 kilograms. The fact that it coexisted with at least 6 other crocodilian species in the same system is remarkable. Murasuchus, the so-called pancake croc, had a flat, broad skull and appears to have filter-fed like a pelican, a crocodilian unlike anything alive today. Griposuchus, with its long, narrow snout, occupied a fish specialist niche similar to modern gharials. The ecological partitioning required to sustain that many large crocodilians simultaneously implies a level of biological productivity that has no modern parallel in freshwater systems. Purussaurus fossils have been found across Brazil, Venezuela, Colombia, and Peru, confirming a pan-Amazonian distribution. Multiple species have been described: P. brasiliensis, P. navensis, P. mirandii, though there is ongoing taxonomic debate about their validity. When the Pibas system drained, Purussaurus lost the vast shallow water habitat it depended on. The modern Amazon, with its deep channels and fast currents, was a fundamentally different ecosystem. The modern black caiman, Melanosuchus niger, is the largest predator in the Amazon today at up to 5 meters. It is less than half the length of Purussaurus. The apex predator niche that Purussaurus occupied has never been refilled at anything approaching comparable scale. The Amazon has been diminished ever since. Number 7. The Acre Geoglyphs. In the 1980s, a Brazilian geographer named Alteo Ronzi was flying over the state of Acre in the southwestern Amazon when he looked down and saw something that should not have been there. Cut into the cleared ground below were perfect geometric shapes, circles, squares, octagons, carved at a scale visible from the air. They had been hidden under the jungle canopy for centuries, revealed only by modern deforestation and cattle ranching. Over 450 geometric earthworks have now been documented in Acre. Some exceed 300 meters in diameter. The ditches are typically 1 to 3 meters deep and 10 to 12 meters wide, with embankments of excavated earth running alongside. Radiocarbon dating places their construction between approximately 2,000 and 700 years ago, roughly the year 0 to 1300 CE. The precision of the geometry is striking. Perfect circles. Squares inscribed within circles. Composite forms with mathematical regularity. This implies surveying and measurement techniques that required specialized knowledge and coordinated labor. Individual geoglyphs required the excavation of thousands of cubic meters of earth. They were maintained over centuries, which means a sustained social organization capable of mobilizing labor across generations. In 2017, Jennifer Watling and colleagues published a study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences that changed how the geoglyphs were understood. Using phytolith analysis on soil charcoal data, they demonstrated that the geoglyphs were built in forest that was already being managed, not cleared virgin jungle. The builders practiced a form of agroforestry, selectively tending the forest rather than destroying it. This challenges two narratives simultaneously: the idea that the Amazon was pristine wilderness, and the assumption that monumental earthworks require wholesale deforestation. The function of the geoglyphs remains debated. No significant habitation debris, no middens, post holes, or domestic artifacts has been found inside most of them, arguing against residential use. The soil within the earthworks shows no Terra Preta enrichment, so they were not agricultural sites. Candidates include ceremonial or ritual gathering places, astronomical observatories, and territorial markers. Some researchers draw comparisons to the Nazca lines, not in form, but in probable function. The builder's identity is unknown. No continuous cultural tradition links them to any modern indigenous group in the region. Whoever built them, and whatever purpose they served, the forest reclaimed them so completely that they were invisible for centuries. It took ecological destruction to reveal them, a grim irony that continues as new geoglyphs are exposed each year by advancing deforestation. Some of the earthworks are connected by straight roads, suggesting they functioned as nodes in a larger network. They are part of a broader pattern of monumental earthwork construction across the southern Amazon that is only now being mapped. Number 8. The Marajó Island Burial Urns. Marajó Island sits at the mouth of the Amazon River. It is the world's largest fluvial island, roughly the size of Switzerland, subject to seasonal flooding that can inundate the landscape for up to 6 months of the year. It is an improbable place to build a civilization. The Marajoara did it anyway. The Marajoara phase, dating from approximately 400 to 1300 CE, produced some of the most elaborate ceramic art anywhere in pre-Columbian South America. But these were not decorative objects. They were containers for the dead. The Marajoara practiced secondary burial. The body was first allowed to decompose either through natural processes or a deliberate defleshing. Once the bones were cleaned, they were placed inside large, elaborately decorated ceramic urns. The urns range from 50 centimeters to over a meter in height, painted and incised with geometric designs in red, black, and white. The motifs include stylized human faces, serpents, and abstract patterns that may encode cosmological or social information that we cannot currently read. Some urns contain the remains of multiple individuals, suggesting communal or family burial practices. The Marajoara built earthen mounds, called tessos, on the flood-prone island, elevating their living and ceremonial spaces above the water. Some mounds rise to 10 meters and contain over 30,000 cubic meters of deliberately transported earth. The labor investment was enormous, comparable to mound-building cultures in the Mississippi Valley. Social stratification is legible in the burials. Elite individuals were interred in elaborate urns with grave goods. Others received simpler vessels. Some skeletal remains show perimortem trauma, injuries inflicted at or near the time of death, indicating either ritual violence or warfare. The Marajó also produced a uniquely strange artifact, tangas. These are triangular ceramic pieces, intricately decorated, believed to have been worn as pubic covers by women. Nothing else like them exists anywhere in the archaeological record. Their exact function, decorative, ritual, social signifier, is still debated. The significance of the Marajoara extends beyond their ceramics. In 1971, the archaeologist Betty Meggers argued that Amazonian societies were fundamentally limited by poor soils and could never develop complex chiefdoms or urban centers. The Amazon, in her model, was an environmental ceiling. Anna Roosevelt's excavations at Marajó in the 1980s and 90s demolished that argument. The evidence of social stratification, monumental construction, long-distance trade networks reaching into the Andes and the Caribbean, and sustained intensive occupation over centuries proved that complex, hierarchically organized societies could and did develop in the Amazon. The Marajoara culture declined before European contact. Whether the cause was internal social collapse, intergroup warfare, or environmental stress remains uncertain. The mounds endure. The urns, many now scattered across museum collections from Belém to Washington to Berlin, are among the few legible records of a society that archaeology still cannot fully account for. Number 9. Terra Preta and the signature of civilizational collapse. If you dig a hole in most of the Amazon basin, you will hit oxysol or ultisol, acidic, nutrient-poor soil leached by millions of years of tropical rainfall. It is terrible for agriculture. It is one of the reasons the Amazon was long considered incapable of supporting large populations. But scattered across the basin, in Brazil, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and the Guianas, are patches of something completely different. Soil that is jet black, sometimes a meter or more deep, rich with charcoal fragments and broken pottery. It is dramatically more fertile than anything surrounding it. Modern Amazonian farmers prize it. They actively seek it out. Crops grown on it can yield several times more than the same crops planted in adjacent natural soil. It is called Terra, Preta, do Indio, Indian black earth, and it was made by humans. The key ingredient is biochar, partially combusted organic matter that creates a stable carbon matrix capable of retaining nutrients and water for centuries or longer. The soil also contains elevated concentrations of phosphorus, calcium, and nitrogen. It was created through a combination of practices: kitchen middens, controlled burning of crop waste, composting, and the deliberate incorporation of charcoal into the ground. Radiocarbon dating of Terra Preta deposit spans approximately 7,000 years, with the peak period of creation falling between 2,500 and 500 years ago. The patches range in size from less than a hectare to over 350 hectares. Conservative estimates of total coverage suggest tens of thousands of square kilometers across the basin. The soil is, to some degree, self-regenerating. Microbial communities within it continue to process organic matter and maintain fertility long after the people who created it are gone. Those people. The population that created Terra Preta is estimated, based on settlement density and agricultural capacity, at 8 to 20 million across the Amazon basin. And within approximately 1 century of European contact, roughly 90 to 95% of them were dead. The diseases came first. Smallpox, measles, influenza, pathogens to which indigenous populations had no immunological exposure, spread along trade networks, often arriving years or decades ahead of the Europeans themselves. The demographic collapse was so rapid and so complete that by the time systematic European exploration of the Amazon interior occurred, the forest had already reclaimed most settlements. Francisco de Orellana's 1542 expedition down the Amazon, the first European descent of the river, described dense populations lining the banks, large towns, agricultural landscapes, roads. His chronicler, Gaspar de Carvajal, wrote of provinces containing thousands of inhabitants. When subsequent explorers followed the same route decades later, they found sparse forest peoples and dense jungle. The pristine rainforest that Europeans believed they had discovered was a post-apocalyptic landscape. The wilderness was not primordial, it was regrowth. The jungle that we now fight to protect grew back over the ruins of a civilization that had been effectively extinguished within a single century. William Denevaine's 1992 paper, The Pristine Myth, was a landmark in reframing this history. Charles Mann's 2005 book, 1491, brought the Terra Preta evidence and the concept of a densely populated, engineered Amazon to a general audience. The lost soil technology that made it all possible, a method of creating permanently fertile ground in one of the most nutrient-poor environments on Earth, is something modern agricultural science is only now attempting to replicate through biochar research. The knowledge itself died with the people who held it. Number 10. Phorusrhacids, the terror birds of the Amazon corridor. Before the giant turtles, before the mega caimans, before the piranhas, and the inland sea, South America was an island. And on that island, the apex predators were not mammals. They were birds. The Phorusrhacidae, the terror birds, were a family of large flightless predatory birds that dominated South America for approximately 60 million years. From the Paleocene, shortly after the extinction of the non-avian dinosaurs, through to the Pleistocene, they occupied the large terrestrial predator niche across the continent. South America had separated from the rest of Gondwana roughly 66 million years ago, and would remain isolated until the formation of the Isthmus of Panama approximately 3 million years ago. During that long isolation, evolution ran a parallel experiment. In the absence of large mammalian carnivores, the descendants of dinosaurs stepped in. The largest known terror bird, Calenkin guillermois, stood approximately 3 meters tall. Its skull, described by Bertelli and colleagues in 2007 from a nearly complete specimen found in Patagonia, measured almost 72 centimeters in length. That is the largest bird skull ever discovered. The skull was built like a hatchet, tall, laterally compressed, with a massive hooked beak at the front. It was an instrument of blunt force killing. In 2010, Federico de Grange and colleagues published a biomechanical analysis showing that terror bird skulls were optimized for repeated dorsoventral strikes, powerful, hammering blows directed downward onto prey. Not lateral shaking, like a crocodilian. Not sustained bite pressure, like a big cat. Hammering. The hunting strategy was unique among all known predators, living or extinct. The Amazon basin during the Miocene and Pliocene was a mosaic of forest, savanna, and wetland. The edges of that mosaic, where open ground met tree cover, were ideal hunting territory for terror birds. Smaller species like Coelopterus, roughly a meter tall, were likely adapted to forested environments. The larger species operated in more open habitats, running down prey on powerful legs with binocular vision giving them depth perception for striking. Everything changed roughly 3 million years ago. The Isthmus of Panama formed, connecting North and South America for the first time in over 60 million years. The Great American Biotic Interchange began. North American placental carnivores, wolves, saber-toothed cats, bears, flooded south. South American species migrated north. The exchange was not symmetrical. Armadillos, opossums, and ground sloths established themselves successfully in North America. But South American predators, including the terror birds, were largely replaced. The last known terror bird species, Titanus whalleri, survived until approximately 1.8 million years ago. Not in South America, but in Florida, where it had migrated north before the final collapse. Its extinction marked the end of the last non-mammalian apex predator lineage on the American continents. A 60 million year reign ended within a geological eye blink of the land bridge forming. The closest living relatives of terror birds are the Seriemas, small predatory birds still found in the grasslands and cerrado of South America. Seriemas kill prey by gripping it in their beak and smashing it against the ground. A behavior that may be a diminished echo of the terror bird hunting strategy preserved across millions of years of evolutionary divergence. Relatively few terror bird fossils have been found in the Amazon basin itself, compared to the rich record in Patagonia and the Argentine Pampas. Tropical environments are poor at preserving bone. The acidic soils, the humidity, the relentless biological recycling of the forest floor, the same forces that hide cities and dissolve civilizations also consume the bones of predators. What we have found is almost certainly a fraction of what lived there. The Peba system drained and took the megacaimans and the giant turtles with it. The ground sloths fell to climate change and human hunters. The terror birds were outcompeted by mammalian carnivores from the north. The Lidar cities emptied as disease swept ahead of European contact. The Terra Preta darkened the soil, and then the hands that made it were gone. The Amazon recycles everything. Bones, buildings, entire civilizations, all of it is drawn back into the soil, processed by fungi and bacteria, incorporated into root systems and canopy. The finds in this video are the exceptions. The scars on a turtle shell that were hard enough to survive. The biochar that was chemically too stable to decompose. The geometry of ditches too deep for the forest to fill. The Amazon keeps its secrets not through malice, but through metabolism. It is the most efficient recycling system on the planet, and it does not distinguish between a fallen tree and a fallen civilization. What we have uncovered through lasers fired from aircraft, through electron microscopes aimed at bone, through shovels hitting black earth, is almost certainly a fraction of what once existed. Every Lidar flight reveals more. Every excavation rewrites the timeline. The Amazon is not the ancient wilderness we were taught to see. It is the world's largest document of loss, written in a language that consumes itself as fast as it is spoken. The Peba system drained over roughly 3 million years. That is fast, geologically speaking, and the consequences cascaded through every level of the food web simultaneously. Purussaurus lost the shallow lakes it ambushed prey in. Stupendemys lost the calm waters it grazed in. Megapiranha lost the medium-depth river channels where its bite force made it king. The marine species that had colonized the inland sea, the sharks, the sawfish, the dugongs, were cut off from the Caribbean and stranded in freshwater that was itself disappearing. The mollusk radiation that had produced hundreds of endemic species collapsed as water chemistry shifted. The transition was not a single event. It was a slow-motion extinction driven by tectonics and sediment. As the Andes continued to rise, the rivers pouring off them carried increasing volumes of sediment into the Pebas Basin. The shallow lakes filled in. The Purus Arch, the geological barrier that had held the water in the west, was gradually breached. Water that had pooled for millions of years began to drain east, carving the channel that would become the modern Amazon River. Crocodilian diversity collapsed from 7 or more coexisting species to 2 or 3. The giant turtle lineages vanished. The brackish water specialists that had thrived in the marine influence Pebas had no habitat left. The modern Amazon fauna, the black caimans, the river turtles, the piranhas, are the impoverished remnants of the Pebas community. They are the survivors, not the originals. The Amazon River that we treat as eternal is, in geological terms, young. The rainforest that grows along its banks is younger still. Pollen records show dramatic vegetation shifts across the basin over the last 10 million years. The ancient jungle is a recent landscape growing on top of a drowned world. Every species alive in the modern Amazon exists because the Pebas system died. The biodiversity hotspot we are now destroying was itself built on millions of years of extinction. The Pebas sediments remain one of the most underexplored paleontological resources on Earth. Most formations are accessible only by river, deep in the jungle interior. Each expedition pulls out fossils that rewrite the timeline. The Amazon's sinister history is not one story. It is layered geological, ecological, human, each catastrophe buried beneath the next. The megafauna died because their world changed beneath them. The human civilizations that followed died because the world came to them. The Lidar cities, the Terra Preta fields, the Acre Geoglyphs, and the Marajó burial mounds are not isolated curiosities. They are fragments of a single continental-scale phenomenon. The Amazon basin before European contact was not a scattering of small tribes moving through untouched wilderness. It was a network of engineered landscapes, urban systems, and sophisticated agricultural civilizations operating across millions of square kilometers. The Lidar evidence from Bolivia, Ecuador, and Brazil reveals interconnected urban centers with hierarchical settlement patterns. The Terra Preta distribution maps agricultural zones that sustained millions. The geoglyphs represent ceremonial or territorial infrastructure maintained across centuries. The Marajó culture demonstrates social stratification, monumental architecture, and long-distance trade networks reaching into the Andes and the Caribbean. The Meggers-Roosevelt debate whether the Amazon could support complex societies is effectively settled. The evidence is overwhelming. Population estimates of 8 to 20 million people place the pre-contact Amazon on par with contemporary Mesoamerica in demographic terms. The agricultural systems, raised fields, terra preta, agroforestry, were not primitive adaptations to a hostile environment. They were engineered solutions of extraordinary sophistication, producing surplus food that supported non-farming populations, specialists, builders, and rulers. These were not one civilization, they were many. Distinct cultures, distinct ceramic traditions, distinct architectural forms, spread across a region larger than Western Europe. The diversity of Amazon societies mirrored the diversity of its ecology, and nearly all of them were gone within a century of European contact. The mechanism was disease. Smallpox, measles, influenza, pathogens carried across the Atlantic, spread along existing indigenous trade networks faster than any European could travel. Epidemics moved through river systems along causeways between the very cities that Lidar is now rediscovering. In many cases, the disease arrived years or decades before any Europeans set foot in the region. Entire populations collapsed without ever seeing the people who had killed them. The scale of the demographic catastrophe is difficult to comprehend. A 90 to 95% mortality rate sustained across an entire continent within roughly 100 years. The Black Death killed approximately 30 to 60% of Europe's population. The Amazonian collapse was equivalent to the Black Death happening 3 or 4 times in succession, with no recovery between waves. Francisco de Orellana's 1542 expedition is the critical timestamp. His chronicler, Gaspar de Carvajal, described a populated Amazon, large towns lining the riverbanks, cultivated fields, road systems, organized provinces with thousands of inhabitants. When subsequent European explorers followed the same route in the 1600s, they found sparse populations and dense jungle. The cities were gone, the fields were overgrown, the causeways were buried. The pristine rainforest narrative that emerged from those later accounts was not a description of an ancient landscape. It was a description of a post-apocalyptic one. Europeans arrived after the collapse, and mistook the aftermath for the original condition. The myth served colonial interests perfectly. If the land had always been empty wilderness, then there were no prior claims to contest. William Denovan's 1992 paper, The Pristine Myth, named this erasure for what it was. The discovery of Amazonian civilizations through Lidar and soil science is not a discovery at all. It is a rediscovery of what was known, lived in, and then obliterated. The population genetics of modern indigenous Amazonian groups carry bottleneck signatures, reduced genetic diversity consistent with catastrophic population collapse, followed by recovery from a tiny surviving remnant. The Terra Preta itself is a genetic record of sorts. The charcoal, the pottery fragments, the nutrient profiles are the chemical fingerprints of millions of people who lived, farmed, cooked, and died across thousands of years. The soil remembers what the forest has tried to erase. Everything the viewer has been taught about the Amazon, the biodiversity, the lungs of the earth, the primordial wilderness, is the aftermath. Not one aftermath, but several, stacked on top of each other like geological strata. The Miocene Amazon was an inland sea teeming with sharks, megacaimans, and giant turtles. That world was destroyed by tectonic forces and replaced by a river system. The Pleistocene Amazon was home to giant ground sloths, terror birds, and megafauna whose ecological footprint shaped the forest itself. That world was destroyed by climate change and human hunters. The pre-contact Amazon was a managed landscape of cities, farms, and engineered soils supporting tens of millions of people. That world was destroyed by epidemic disease within a single century. What we see today, the forest that conservationists rightly fight to protect, is what grew back after the last collapse. The primary forest may be centuries-old secondary growth, reclaiming land that was cleared and cultivated for millennia. The species composition of the canopy was shaped by thousands of years of human management, and then by the abrupt removal of those managers. The megafauna fruits still hang from trees, designed for giant mouths that have been gone for 10,000 years. The Terra Preta patches persist as hyperproductive micro-ecosystems within a forest that has long since forgotten who made them. The current wave of deforestation is the fourth major transformation. Pebas to river system, megafauna extinction, civilizational collapse and regrowth. And now, industrial clearing. Each layer of the Amazon contains physical evidence of the one before it, if you know where to look, and if you get there before the evidence is destroyed. The Amazon is not what we were told. It is the world's largest document of loss. And the sinister thread that connects every find in this video is not violence or predation or extinction, though all of those are present. It is erasure. The Amazon hides its own history because it recycles everything. Bones dissolve in acidic soil. Wood rots in tropical humidity. Earthworks are colonized by roots. Cities are swallowed by canopy. The jungle keeps its secrets not through malice, but through metabolism. It is the most efficient recycling system on Earth, and it does not distinguish between a fallen tree and a fallen civilization. The finds in this video are the exceptions, the things that resisted the erasure. A turtle shell hard enough to preserve bite marks for 10 million years. Biochar too chemically stable to decompose. Ditches too deep for the roots to fill. Ceramic urns too dense for the soil to dissolve. Every one of them is an accident of preservation in a landscape that is designed at every level to consume its own past. What we have uncovered so far is almost certainly a fraction of what once existed. Every Lidar flight reveals more geometry beneath the canopy. Every excavation rewrites the timeline. Every fossil pulled from the riverbank adds another chapter to a history that the jungle has spent millions of years trying to digest. The Amazon's past is sinister not because of what happened, though what happened was often terrible, but because of how thoroughly it was hidden. The deepest history is always the hardest to find, and the Amazon is the world's greatest example of a landscape that consumes itself as fast as it is written.